Live from the Lincoln Theater at the University of Hartford, the Hartford Current and Fox Connecticut present a debate featuring the Republican candidates for Connecticut's open U.S. Senate seat.
Peter Schiff is a successful businessman, best-selling author, and economic expert, widely credited with foretelling the U.S. economic crisis years before it occurred. The economy shows signs of crawling out of the recession with 2 straight quarters of economic growth in 2009. Yet job growth is slow, and many are predicting a double-dip housing slump. What's your plan for repairing the economy, and would you support a second stimulus bill?
Well, first of all, Washington is trying to convince us that we're having a jobless recovery. They're half right. The reason that it's jobless is because it's not a recovery. All we're doing is spending more borrowed money, and that's the source of our problem. You see, we have to make a decision as a nation. Do we want to grow the government or grow the economy? Because we can't do both. The stimulus is not the answer. The stimulus is part of the problem. It's actually a depressant. The government has been growing like a cancer, and the bigger the government gets, the more blood it actually sucks from the taxpayer to sustain it. We need real economic reform to unleash capitalism and free markets, and that means we have to slash government spending right now. We have to lower taxes, and we have to reduce the regulations that are burdening business and destroying jobs. I opposed TARP as well. I opposed it on national television when everybody told us that we needed it. We're not going to solve these problems until we understand the nature of the problem. See, the country is in trouble because we spent too much money. Individuals spent too much money. We went on a global shopping spree with government money. We bought all sorts of things we couldn't afford. Now the government is spending money on programs we don't need and we can't afford. In order to get out of this hole, we're going to have to work our way out and produce our way out. We can't spend our way to prosperity. We can't borrow our way out of debt. We need capital, we need investments, and all of this is being inhibited by the stimulus and by the TARPs. We need to embrace free market capitalism. That was the source of our original prosperity, and it's the only way we're going to regain it.
His question, what specific changes would you advocate as a senator to stimulate job creation? I believe we were just talking about that. Mr. Schiff, how to create jobs?
Well, first we have to understand where jobs come from. They come from private enterprise. They come from profits. They come from savings. They come from investment. They don't come from government. Government inhibits job creation. We can't create jobs by passing legislation. We can certainly destroy jobs. We have to remember that the government doesn't have any resources. The government only has the resources that they take from the private sector. And it's very easy for our elected leaders to point to a job that they claim was created by the stimulus. But they don't accept responsibility for the better jobs that the stimulus money destroyed. Because the government had to take that money from one company in order to feed it to another company that maybe should have failed, or maybe is a government job. And the problem with government jobs is we have to pay their salaries. Private sector jobs are self-sustaining, and they actually produce things that increase the standard of living of everybody. So we need more private sector jobs, and to get them, we need a lot less government, we need less regulations and lower taxes, and we can't do that unless we cut spending.
Mr. Schiff, 1 minute for rebuttal on job creation.
Well, again, we have to understand where jobs come from. You know, politicians like to promise that they can create jobs because it sounds good. They like to have summits on how to create jobs. Meanwhile, everything that they're doing is preventing jobs from being created. That's why almost 10% of the nation is unemployed. It's actually more like 17% if you count the people who are underemployed working part-time or who have just given up and are now discouraged. So what the government has to do is understand all the roadblocks that it puts in front of employers that prevent them from hiring people, roadblocks that I've experienced in my own business. We need to make it easier for businesses to expand and grow. We need to lift the burden of government. That's the only real stimulus that we have, is by shrinking government. But with all the money the government is spending, and more important, all the money the government is borrowing, if you want to know why businesses aren't loaning, they're loaning. The problem is they're loaning it all to the federal government. There's nothing left for anybody else. So until we stop the spending, we're not going to get economic growth, and we're not going to get job creation.
American soldiers have been engaged in Iraq and Afghanistan for most of the last decade. They are fighting valiantly, but battle-weary and stretched thin, as is, frankly, the American public. Yet many, if not most of us, are convinced Iran is trying to disguise a nuclear weapons development program as a nuclear power program. Given Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's recent comment that Iran is moving toward a military dictatorship, what's your plan for dealing with Iran, and would a military strike be necessary or advisable?
Well, first of all, obviously Iran is a serious threat They have supported terrorism, and we need to make sure that they don't become a nuclear threat. So if I was a member of the United States Senate, I would certainly do whatever I could to make sure that that did not happen. It would involve diplomacy first, but ultimately, if that failed, it would involve a military action. But I don't believe we should make the same mistakes in Iran that we made in Iraq. I don't believe that we need to invade the country and occupy the country and try to rebuild it. If there is a legitimate nuclear threat and we can identify that, let's neutralize that threat, but let's not commit our troops to an endless war that becomes a costly quagmire that we can't afford at this point. Well, obviously, as I said, Iran is a threat, and I think we have to guard against that threat. But we have to be careful with our military policy. Remember, the reason that we went into Afghanistan initially was we were going to get Osama bin Laden, which certainly made a lot of sense, given what he did. But he's not even there anymore, and we're committing more troops. We have to have real plans before we go into a nation. I thought it was a mistake at the time, and I still think that we shouldn't have gone into Iraq. And so we have to run our foreign policy to protect America and American interests, and we can't get into nation building and try to involve ourselves in too many places around the world. We have troops in 150 or 160 countries. We have a lot of military bases. We need to focus on defending the United States, especially since we're broke at this point, and we can't keep charging our national defense on a credit card and expect that it's not going to come back to bite us.
When should American troops be withdrawn from Iraq and Afghanistan? And Mr. Schiff, it's your answer.
Well, as I said, I was against bringing them to Iraq in the first place. I certainly think we should have some type of timetable to bring them out, but I don't know exactly what that timetable should be. I think the same thing is true for Afghanistan. I think we have to have a mission, and I think we need to have some way to be victorious and a way to get out of there and maybe leave a small presence, but we don't need the troops that we have now. And I understand that national defense is the most important issue for the federal government. It's the one thing that it's supposed to really do. It's the main reason that our founding fathers gave Congress the ability to tax us in the first place. But the problem is the government is focusing on so many things that are not authorized by the Constitution that the one thing it's really supposed to do, it doesn't do right. So if we can focus more on national defense and less on all the other issues that are better left to the states or not done at all by government, I think we'd all be better off. Thank you. I think one thing I'd want to add is we can't overlook the financial position of our government and our ability to continue to maintain our military. Even Hillary Clinton last week mentioned that she thought the budget deficits and the national debt are now a national security issue. And she ought to know, as a United States Senator, she helped run the deficits up, and now as part of the Obama administration, they're going through the roof. The Soviet Union at one time was a powerful military power, and it disintegrated because it collapsed financially. It could no longer afford the empire. We're in the same situation. We're borrowing money from China, from Japan, from Saudi Arabia to supply the troops. We can't keep doing that and remain a military power. So I think the best thing that we could do for national security is have financial security, and the only way to do that is to get this out-of-control government spending under control.